The forest clearing fell silent except for the sound of my ragged breathing as I pressed my back against the ancient oak tree. Blood trickled down my cheek from where Marcus had struck me, the metallic taste filling my mouth as I stared at the circle of wolves surrounding me. "Please," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the low growls echoing through the darkness. "I didn't mean to cross into your territory. I was just trying to get home." Marcus shifted back to his human form, his eyes blazing with cruel satisfaction as he towered over me. "Home?" He laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "You mean that pathetic excuse for a cottage on the edge of our lands? Face it, Luna, you don't belong anywhere." Before we continue, please subscribe if you like this story so far. The other pack members remained in their wolf forms, forming an impenetrable circle around me. Their eyes glowed amber in the moonlight, reflecting nothing but contempt for what I was. An albino omega, cursed from birth with white hair and pale skin that marked me as different, as wrong. "You've been stealing from our hunting grounds," Marcus continued, circling me like a predator. "Taking rabbits and herbs that belong to the Crescent Moon Pack. Did you really think we wouldn't notice?" "I only took what I needed to survive," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the terror coursing through my veins. "My grandmother is sick. The herbs from your territory are the only things that ease her pain." "Your grandmother?" Marcus spat on the ground near my feet. "That old witch should have died years ago. Just like you should have been left in the woods to die when you were born. What kind of wolf produces an albino freak?" The words hit me like physical blows. I'd heard them all my life, whispered behind my back in the village, shouted at me by pack members who saw my appearance as a curse upon our kind. But hearing them now, surrounded by wolves who could tear me apart in seconds, made them cut deeper than ever before. "I'm still a wolf," I said, lifting my chin despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. "I have as much right to live as any of you." Marcus's expression darkened. "Rights? You think you have rights?" He gestured to the wolves around us. "Look around you, Luna. You're outnumbered, outmatched, and completely alone. Nobody's coming to save the freak Omega." As if responding to his words, the wolves tightened their circle, moving closer until I could feel their hot breath on my skin. My wolf, weak as she was, cowered inside me, too frightened to even consider shifting. What was the point? Even in wolf form, I was smaller and weaker than the rest of them. "You know what I think?" Marcus leaned down until his face was inches from mine. "I think it's time we solved the problem of Luna Whitehawk, once and for all." My heart hammered against my ribcage. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, "that maybe if you kneel and beg for forgiveness, we might let you live. Of course, you'd have to prove your submission to the pack. Starting with me." The implications in his tone made my stomach turn. I'd rather die than submit to Marcus in the way he was suggesting. But as I looked around at the circle of wolves, their eyes reflecting nothing but hostility, I realized I might not have a choice. "Kneel," Marcus commanded, his alpha voice pressing down on me with supernatural force. My legs trembled as I fought against the compulsion, but I was too weak, too frightened to resist. Slowly, painfully, I sank to my knees in the damp earth of the forest floor. The wolves around me seemed to sense my defeat, their growls growing more menacing. "That's better," Marcus said with satisfaction. "Now let's discuss the terms of your continued existence." But before he could continue, a new sound echoed through the forest. The deep, resonating howl of a wolf unlike any I'd ever heard. It was powerful, commanding, and filled with an authority that made every wolf in the clearing freeze in place. Marcus's eyes widened with something that looked like fear. "That can't be," he whispered. The howl came again, closer this time, and I felt something stir within my chest, a recognition that went deeper than conscious thought. My wolf, who had been cowering in terror moments before, suddenly lifted her head with interest. "Everyone stay calm," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "It's probably just a rogue passing through." But even as he spoke, the scent hit me. Pine and rain, strength and dominance, with an underlying warmth that made my entire being respond with longing. It was the most intoxicating scent I'd ever encountered, and it was getting stronger. The wolves around me began to shift nervously, some whimpering as they backed away from the edge of the clearing. Whatever was approaching had them terrified, and their fear was infectious. Then he appeared. He moved through the trees like a shadow given form, silent and graceful despite his massive size. In human form, he stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a presence that commanded attention. His dark hair caught the moonlight, and when his eyes met mine across the clearing, I felt the world shift on its axis. Those eyes, they were the deepest green I'd ever seen, like emeralds lit from within. And they were focused entirely on me, kneeling in the dirt surrounded by hostile wolves. Marcus was the first to break the silence. "Alpha King Damien," he said, his voice carefully respectful but strained. "We weren't expecting you in our territory." So this was the Alpha King I'd heard whispered about in stories. The most powerful werewolf in North America, ruler of all the packs from coast to coast. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in his early 30s, but there was an ageless quality to his presence that spoke of immense power and experience. Damien's gaze never left me as he responded to Marcus. "I was tracking a scent," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "A scent that led me here." "If you're hunting rogues, Your Majesty, we haven't seen any," Marcus said quickly. "We were just dealing with a small disciplinary matter." "Disciplinary matter." Damien's tone was flat, dangerous. "Is that what you call surrounding a lone Omega with hostile wolves?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "She was stealing from our territory. Pack law demands—" "I know what pack law demands," Damien interrupted, finally looking away from me to fix Marcus with a stare that made the other alpha visibly flinch. "But I'm more interested in why you felt the need to handle this matter with such enthusiasm." The implied threat in his words was unmistakable. Several of the wolves around me began backing away, recognizing the danger they were suddenly in. But I found myself frozen in place, not by fear this time, but by the inexplicable pull I felt toward this powerful stranger. "She's just an albino Omega," Marcus said defensively, "a freak of nature who's been nothing but trouble for years. We thought it was time to remind her of her place." The moment the word freak left Marcus's mouth, the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop 10 degrees. Damien's eyes flashed with something predatory, and a low growl rumbled from his chest that made every wolf present submit instinctively. "Her place," Damien repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "And where, exactly, do you believe her place to be?" Marcus swallowed hard. That is, she's an Omega, the lowest of the low. She should know better than to challenge pack authority." "I see." Damien began walking toward us, his movements fluid and purposeful. "And you believe that gives you the right to terrorize her? To threaten her with violence?" "We were just teaching her respect," Marcus stammered. Damien stopped directly in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body. When he looked down at me, his expression softened in a way that made my heart skip. "Stand up," he said gently. It wasn't a command backed by alpha power. It was a request, spoken with such kindness that tears pricked at my eyes. I struggled to my feet on shaking legs, acutely aware of how I must look with my torn clothes and dirt-stained skin. "What's your name?" he asked. "Luna," I whispered. "Luna Whitehawk." "Luna." He repeated my name like it was something precious. "Tell me, Luna, what did you steal that warranted this treatment?" I glanced nervously at Marcus, but Damien's presence gave me courage I didn't know I possessed. "Feverfew and willow bark," I said. "My grandmother has joint pain that keeps her awake at night. These herbs are the only things that help her rest." "And how much did you take?" Just enough for a few days. I know I shouldn't have crossed into their territory, but the herbs that grow near my cottage aren't strong enough." Damien nodded thoughtfully, then turned back to Marcus. "So let me understand this correctly. A young woman gathered common medicinal herbs to ease her grandmother's suffering, and your response was to surround her with a pack of aggressive wolves and threaten her life. Marcus's face flushed red. She trespassed on our land. Land that ultimately belongs to me, Damien reminded him coldly. Land that I granted your pack permission to use. Permission that can be revoked at any time. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Marcus's earlier bravado crumbled as he realized how precarious his position had become. Your Majesty, I was only trying to maintain order. By terrorizing an Omega? Damien's voice rose slightly, and several of the surrounding wolves whimpered. By threatening violence against someone who poses no threat to your pack's security? She's nothing, Marcus said desperately. Just a freak who should have been cast out years ago. The words had barely left his mouth when Damien moved with supernatural speed. One moment he was standing beside me, the next he had Marcus pinned against a tree with his forearm pressed against the other alpha's throat. Say that again, Damien growled, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. Call her a freak one more time, and see what happens. Marcus gasped for air, his feet barely touching the ground. I didn't mean... Oh, but you did mean it, Damien said conversationally, though his grip didn't loosen. Just like you meant to humiliate and threaten her. Just like you meant to use your pack's numbers to intimidate someone who couldn't fight back. He released Marcus suddenly, letting the other alpha drop to the ground in a heap. Marcus scrambled backward, his eyes wide with terror. Here's what's going to happen, Damien announced, his voice carrying to every wolf in the clearing. Luna Whitehawk is under my personal protection. Any wolf who threatens her, who insults her, or who so much as looks at her wrong will answer to me directly. Is that understood? A chorus of whimpers and submissive noises arose from the surrounding wolves. They understood all too well. To cross the Alpha King meant death. But Marcus, either too proud or too stupid to recognize his defeat, struggled to his feet. You can't be serious, he said. She's nobody. Why would you protect a worthless albino Omega? Damien turned to look at me, his green eyes searching my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. When he spoke, his words changed everything. Because she's my mate. The clearing erupted in shocked gasps and whimpers. I felt my knees go weak, certain I had misheard him. There was no way the Alpha King, the most powerful werewolf alive, could be claiming me as his mate. That's impossible, Marcus sputtered. She's a freak of nature. The moon goddess would never pair her with royalty. Damien's expression turned deadly. Are you questioning the wisdom of the moon goddess? The accusation of blasphemy made Marcus go pale. Challenging the divine will of their deity was grounds for immediate execution, and everyone present knew it. No, of course not, Marcus stammered. But surely there's been some mistake. The only mistake, Damien said coldly, was your treatment of my mate. A mistake that will have consequences. He turned to address the other wolves. Leave us. Now. The pack scattered instantly, desperate to escape the Alpha King's wrath. Even Marcus retreated, though not before shooting me a look filled with hatred and disbelief. Within moments we were alone in the clearing. I stood frozen in place, overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. My mate. The Alpha King had called me his mate. Luna, Damien said softly, approaching me with the same care he might use with a frightened animal. Are you hurt? I touched my cheek where Marcus had struck me, wincing as my fingers found the cut. It's nothing, I said automatically. It's not nothing. His voice was gentle, but firm. He hurt you. That makes it very much something. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. When I didn't move, he cupped my face in his large, warm hands, examining the cut with careful attention. This will heal cleanly, he said, but you'll need to clean it properly when you get home. Home, I repeated numbly. I should go. My grandmother will be worried. I'll escort you, he said immediately. I looked up at him in surprise. You don't have to do that. I'm sure you have important things to do. His thumb brushed gently across my uninjured cheek. nothing more important than ensuring my mate's safety. There was that word again. Mate. I still couldn't quite believe it was real. Is it true? I whispered. Can you really feel the mate bond with me? Instead of answering with words, Damien leaned down and gently pressed his forehead against mine. Instantly, I felt it. A warmth that spread through my entire being. A sense of rightness and completion that I'd never experienced before. My wolf practically purred with contentment, finally at peace for the first time in my life. Do you feel it now? He asked quietly. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. But I don't understand. Why me? I'm everything Marcus said I was. A freak, an outcast. Why would the moon goddess pair you with someone like me? Damien pulled back to look into my eyes. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I held my breath, afraid of his answer. I see a woman brave enough to risk her own safety for someone she loves, he said. I see someone who faced down a pack of hostile wolves rather than abandon her grandmother. I see strength, compassion, and a beauty that takes my breath away. But my appearance is extraordinary, he interrupted. Your hair is like moonlight, your skin like fresh snow. Your eyes hold depths I could lose myself in. You're not a freak, Luna. You're a miracle. The words broke something open inside me, and I began to sob, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in my life, someone saw me as something other than a mistake of nature. Damien gathered me into his arms, holding me against his chest while I cried. He was so warm, so solid and reassuring. His scent enveloped me, making my wolf settle into peaceful contentment. It's all right, he murmured into my hair. You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you again. When my tears finally subsided, I pulled back to look at him. What happens now? Now, he said, brushing the last tears from my cheeks. I take you home to your grandmother, and tomorrow we begin planning our future together. But I'm nobody, I protested. I live in a tiny cottage with my sick grandmother. I have no pack, no status, nothing to offer you. You have everything I've been searching for, he said firmly. A pure heart, unwavering loyalty, and the other half of my soul. What more could I possibly want? As we walked through the forest toward my cottage, Damien kept one protective arm around my shoulders. I still couldn't quite believe this was real, that the most powerful alpha in the world was my mate, that someone finally wanted me despite my differences. There's something I need to tell you, I said as we approached the small clearing where I lived. My grandmother, she's not entirely wolf. Damien looked down at me with interest. What is she? Part which? I admitted reluctantly. That's where my albino coloring comes from. Mixed bloodlines. Most wolves see it as an abomination. Most wolves, Damien said calmly, haven't lived as long as I have. I've learned that mixed bloodlines often produce the strongest, most capable individuals. Relief flooded through me. You're not disgusted? Never, he said firmly. Your heritage is part of what makes you who you are. I wouldn't change a single thing about you. My cottage came into view, a humble structure that looked even smaller next to Damien's imposing presence. Smoke curled from the chimney, indicating that my grandmother was awake despite the late hour. Luna! Her voice called out before we even reached the door. Is that you, child? Yes, grandmother, I called back, and I've brought someone to meet you. The door opened before we reached it, revealing my grandmother's slight figure silhouetted against the warm light from inside. Despite her age and illness, her dark eyes were sharp as they assessed the man beside me. Alpha King, she said with a respectful nod. I wondered when you would come. Damien and I both stopped in surprise. You knew? I asked. My grandmother smiled, her weathered face creasing with affection. Child, I've known since the day you were born that you were destined for something special. Your coloring, your gentle heart, your inner strength. They were all gifts preparing you for this moment. She stepped aside to let us enter. Come in, both of you. We have much to discuss. The interior of our cottage was simple but warm, filled with the herbs and crystals that aided my grandmother's healing work. Damien had to duck slightly to avoid hitting his head on the low ceiling, but he moved through our humble home with the same grace he'd shown in the forest. "Sit," my grandmother instructed, gesturing to the worn but comfortable chairs near the fireplace. "Luna, make tea for our guest." As I busied myself with the tea preparations, I listened to my grandmother and Damien talk. She asked about his kingdom, his responsibilities, and his plans for the future with a directness that made me cringe internally. But Damien answered every question with patience and respect. "You're concerned about Luna's ability to fulfill the role of queen," he said perceptively. "That's understandable. But I believe she has exactly the qualities needed to rule beside me." "And what qualities are those?" my grandmother asked. "Compassion for those who are different or disadvantaged," Damien replied immediately. "The courage to stand up for what's right, even when she's outmatched. The wisdom to put others' needs before her own. These aren't weaknesses. They're exactly what my people need in a leader." I nearly dropped the teapot. Queen. He was talking about making me his queen. "Luna," my grandmother said gently, "come sit with us." I served the tea with shaking hands before taking a seat beside Damien. He immediately reached for my hand, his warm fingers intertwining with mine. "Your Majesty speaks of making you his queen," my grandmother said. "How does that make you feel?" "Terrified," I admitted honestly. "I don't know the first thing about being royalty. I've never even been accepted by a regular pack." "Fear is natural," Damien said, squeezing my hand gently. "But you won't be alone. I'll teach you everything you need to know, and I'll be beside you every step of the way." My grandmother leaned forward in her chair. "There's something else you both should know," she said seriously. "Luna's mixed heritage gives her certain abilities. They've been dormant because of her isolation, but bonding with her true mate will likely awaken them." "What kind of abilities?" Damien asked with interest rather than concern. "Healing, primarily," my grandmother explained. "The ability to ease pain and accelerate recovery in others. It's a rare gift even among those with witch blood." Damien turned to me with wonder in his eyes. "That's why you were so determined to get herbs for your grandmother. You could sense what would help her." I nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. "I've always been able to tell which plants would be most effective, even without formal training." "A queen with healing abilities," my grandmother mused. "One who understands suffering and has the power to ease it. Perhaps the moon goddess's plan is clearer than we thought." Over the next hour, we discussed practical matters, when Damien and I would complete our mating bond, arrangements for my grandmother's care, and preparations for my eventual introduction to Damien's court. It felt surreal, planning a future so different from anything I'd ever imagined. "There's one more thing," Damien said as the evening wound down. "Marcus and his pack will face consequences for their treatment of you tonight." "You don't have to punish them because of me," I said quickly. "I don't want to cause trouble." "Luna," he said firmly, "they threatened to harm my mate. That cannot go unanswered, or other packs will think they can treat you with disrespect." My grandmother nodded approvingly. "He's right, child. As queen, you'll need to command respect. That starts with ensuring those who wrong you face appropriate consequences." The word queen still sent shivers through me. Tomorrow, my life would change forever. I'd leave this humble cottage and step into a world of power and responsibility I'd never dreamed of. But as I looked at Damien, this powerful, kind man who saw beauty where others saw only flaws, I felt ready for whatever came next. For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. "When do we leave?" I asked. Damien smiled, and the expression transformed his already handsome face into something breathtaking. "Whenever you're ready. But first, there's something I want to give you." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small velvet box. My breath caught as he opened it, revealing a ring unlike anything I'd ever seen. The band was crafted from what looked like silver and gold intertwined, and the stone was a deep green that matched his eyes perfectly. "This ring has been in my family for generations," he said, taking my left hand gently. It's said to have been blessed by the moon goddess herself, meant for the true mate of the Alpha King. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and I gasped as it resized itself to fit perfectly. The moment the metal touched my skin, I felt a surge of power and warmth that left me breathless. "It's beautiful," I whispered, watching as the stone seemed to glow with inner light. "Not as beautiful as you," Damien said, raising my hand to press a gentle kiss to my knuckles. My grandmother wiped tears from her eyes. "Oh, child, you're going to have such a wonderful life." As if responding to our emotions, the ring pulsed with warm light, and I felt the mate bond between Damien and me strengthen even further. We were truly connected now, bound by forces greater than ourselves. "Tomorrow," Damien said, standing and pulling me to my feet, "I'll send people to help pack your belongings and make arrangements for your grandmother. But tonight, I want you to rest and prepare for your new life." He cupped my face in his hands one more time, his thumbs brushing across my cheekbones. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For being brave enough to venture into those woods tonight. For being exactly who you are. For being mine." Before I could respond, he leaned down and pressed a soft, gentle kiss to my lips. It was my first kiss, and it was perfect, filled with promise and tenderness, and a love I was only beginning to understand. When he pulled away, I was breathless and dizzy with emotion. "Until tomorrow, my queen," he said with a formal bow that made me blush. "Until tomorrow, my king," I replied, the words feeling strange but right on my tongue. After he left, my grandmother and I sat by the fire, both lost in thought. "Are you happy, child?" she asked eventually. I looked down at the ring on my finger, still glowing faintly in the firelight. "I think I am," I said wonderingly. "For the first time in my life, I think I'm truly happy." "Good," she said with satisfaction. "You deserve all the joy in the world." As I prepared for bed that night, I caught sight of myself in the small mirror above my wash basin. The same white hair and pale skin looked back at me, but something had changed. Instead of seeing a freak of nature, I saw a woman beloved by the most powerful alpha in the world. I saw a future queen with the power to help and heal others. I saw someone worthy of love. The transformation wasn't complete. It would take time to fully believe in my own worth after a lifetime of rejection. But it was a beginning, and beginnings were often the most magical part of any story. Outside my window, I could hear wolves howling in the distance, but instead of the hostile sounds from earlier, these seemed to be songs of celebration. Word was already spreading through the supernatural community. The Alpha King had found his mate, and she was someone special. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and a completely different life. But tonight, I fell asleep wearing a ring blessed by the moon goddess, claimed and protected by a mate who saw me as perfect exactly as I was. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait to see what the future held.